Welcome to Week 9 of the President's Athletic Conference Football Focus. I'm Waynesburg University senior Carson Fox, and this week our focus turns to the upstart Westminster Titans, who are fighting for an outside shot at a conference title while currently sitting at third in the standings with a conference record of 4-1. Each week, the PAC Football Focus features one team from around the conference. We'll dive headfirst into the program, recap the previous week, and preview Saturday's matchups to get you ready for the upcoming weekend. Make sure to stay tuned following the Football Focus. Andy Stanko and Creg Milko are back for another edition of the PAC Football Pregame Show. We'll take a look back at Week 8, which included a thriller between Washington and Jefferson and Case Western Reserve, and bring you the storylines of an exciting Week 9. In just his second year at the helm of the program, head coach Scott Beznel has turned Westminster into a contender in the PAC at 5-2 overall, while taking W&J to the wire in Week 2. The transformation wasn't an easy process, especially when you consider the Titans were 0-5 to begin 2014. Though, Beznel recounts of when the team started to take steps forward toward the right direction and finished 4-1.
It was a difficult transition because we were just trying to implement our system. We had new players to work with. We had a lot of young guys that we were working with. We played a lot of young players a year ago. We had a ton of freshmen. The thing we kept honing on was, are we getting better? And we definitely saw that. And we were in pretty much 8 of the 10 ball games a year ago. So we felt like we were doing the things that we needed to do to get better. And our guys just kept at it, and that was the biggest, I think the biggest positive sign from us was, our players never faltered, and they believed in what we were telling them, and we got better, and then we got some results towards the end.
One of the biggest reasons for the quick turnaround was Beznel and his staff's efforts on the recruiting trail, as 10 current starters are underclassmen. 13 players from Beznel's 2 classes hail from the Sunshine State of Florida. Beznel says his staff's philosophy is to continue to recruit top local talent and continue to build the pipeline from Florida.
Florida was a unique thing in the sense that that was an area that I had recruited when I was at Robert Morris for about 8 or 9 years, and I actually lived in Orlando, so had some good connections down there. We wanted to try to get our local guys, but we also understood that there's a lot of options for the local players here that maybe people down south, and particularly in Florida, did not have. There wasn't as many small colleges available. We've always been a group that just from a recruiting standpoint tries to get good fits. It's not all about numbers for us. It's about, do we see this guy playing in our system? We will continue to try to recruit guys as close as our next door to as far away as Florida or California or wherever. We just want to get the best football players we can here.
During the last 2 games and wins versus Teal and Waynesburg, sophomore Shamon Walker has started at quarterback for the injured starter sophomore Paul Colombo, who has been nursing a wrist injury to his non-throwing hand. Beznel says he's liked what he's seen from Walker from his time during spring camp, practice, and on game day.
We had a situation where in camp, Paul had injured his thumb on his throwing hand. I think it was about 5th or 6th practice into camp. And so we got a chance to really work Shamon during camp, and he showed a lot of things. His maturation process from a year ago has been really, really good to watch because he's made mistakes, but he hasn't made the same mistakes over and over again. So he's taken coaching. He certainly has grown up a lot and done a really nice job. So we look at it now that we have 2 quarterbacks that we can rely on, and Shamon has certainly fit that role and has done some really good things. It's a positive thing for us. It's unfortunate that Paul got hurt, but in the big picture, it probably made us a better football team.
Despite Walker playing well in his 2 starts and Colombo enduring a down sophomore season, when you compare his current numbers to 2014 when he was an all-PAC honorable mention as a freshman, Beznel says naming a starter will be a game-time decision this week.
He's getting more and more comfortable. He's gotten a lot of reps. It was nice that we had a bye week, so we've had the ability to get him a lot more reps and get him comfortable. So it'll be a game-time decision. We're taking the approach that, we've got 2 starters, and so we're trying to get them both equal reps. And I think, to get Paul back to where he needs to be, he's got to get back in there. And once he gets back in there, the one thing about Paul Colombo, he's a great competitor. He'll do whatever he needs to do to try to win football games, whether that's with his arm or his feet. And so I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully it'll be this week.
Leading the way for Westminster's offense is sophomore running back Dominic McKinley, who's currently 4th in the PAC and 33rd in Division III with 827 rushing yards while scoring 3 touchdowns. Beznel says McKinley's benefited greatly from dedicating himself in the offseason to strength training and playing behind a great offensive line.
The one thing I like about Dom is he brings a physical element to the running back position. This year, put a lot of extra time in the weight room and extra effort to get himself stronger and to be able to play a full college season. And that's not unlike a lot of our freshmen that played a year ago. They didn't quite understand the grind of college football. Dom's done a nice job. You know, he's benefiting from working behind a really good offensive line. That's one area that I don't think we get enough credit for. A year ago, I think our offensive line was average. This year, I think our offensive line is one of the best in the PAC, and I think they're doing a really good job, and Dom's benefiting from that as well. I continue to see him grow up each and every week, too, so the best is still yet ahead for him.
In the receiving corps, Westminster has had 7 different players catch at least 5 passes this season, with Demetrius Bentley leading the way with 21 for 298 yards and 2 touchdowns on the season. Beznel has high aspirations for this core of young receivers next season once they are able to go through another offseason with the program.
Finishing out this year and then moving into next season, getting an off season, getting a spring to get bigger, faster, stronger, a little bit more knowledgeable. I think what was as a group was, above par was going to turn into a really big strength of ours. Paulinelli, Larice Jackson. We've got some 2 freshmen right there that have done some good things for us. And I think Javon Hardy, who's just a sophomore and really only been playing football for 3 years, is going to be a guy that's going to continue to get better and better. So there's 3 quick names that I think will certainly. Ryan Kohler's another young man that we have high expectations. So there's some guys there that are going to be pretty good for us.
Given that Beznel has a defensive background at the FCS level, it was expected Westminster would see a quicker improvement on the defensive side of the ball before offense. Most notably, Westminster's jumped to 3rd in total in scoring defense and 2nd in rush defense in the PAC, while being tied for 10th in the nation in turnovers forced with 21 turnovers on the season. The defense is meeting Beznel's standards overall.
Overall, as a football program, the 2 areas that we wanted to get better, we want to run the football and we want to stop the run. And defensively, you look out there and you see us stopping the run and making teams a little more one-dimensional. And so that's been our biggest improvement. Yeah, I spent a lot of time on the defensive side of the ball. It's an area that I have a great deal of passion for. It's an area that I think we're very proud of, but, it's still a work in progress. But, we've done a nice job of taking the football away, creating turnovers. Like I said, limiting running game. There's still some areas that we have to get a little better at, but some older guys, too, in that area that on the defensive side of the ball that's helped a tremendous amount, too.
The man in the middle opposing PAC offenses have to account for on every play is junior middle linebacker Matt Quinn, who leads the PAC with 80 tackles and 4 forced fumbles, while also sitting in the top 10 in the conference with 9 tackles for loss. Beznel says he can't be more proud of the player Quinn's transformed into during the 2 seasons as his head coach.
When we got Mac, he was sort of like a Tasmanian devil. Just he's very active, but you just didn't know what he was going to do, when he was going to do it. And so he actually, had that moment where he kind of just decided, okay, maybe you guys know what you're doing, and let's go ahead and buy into this. And he's been awesome. I mean, physically, he's done a great job, but more importantly, mentally and emotionally, he's our leader. He gets us lined up. He anticipates very, very well. He's not just good enough just to play the run. He's a complete guy. He's back there in pass coverage doing some things. We'll blitz with him. He's been a lot of fun. He's a junior. He'll be back for another season, which is exciting because I think he's got room to even get much better. He's at the point where he wants to be very, very dominant, and I think when you get to that point mentally, the sky's the limit.
In the secondary, opposing passing games will have to account for sophomore cornerback Todd Jeter, who's tied for 2nd in the PAC with 4 interceptions on the season, while also recording 7 passes defensed, which is also good for top 10 in the conference. It is an interesting story about Jeter's journey to New Wilmington after Jeter originally signed with Division I Temple University out of high school. Beznel is glad to have the playmaker.
We've had a lot of relationships in Division I because we've coached in Division I for some years, and so Terry Smith, who was the head coach at Gateway, who I recruited a lot of players when I was at Robert Morris, Terry and I had a good relationship, and Terry was his coach before he left and went to Temple. Todd got in a situation where he's sort of looking for a home, and so Terry gave me a call, knew that I had a background, particularly in the defensive backs, and said, I got a guy for you. We took a look at Todd, and Todd came in last season with about 4 or 5 days of work before our first game and started every game since. He's a very underrated guy in terms of his intelligence. He understands the big picture very, very well. He's very athletic, obviously, but the other thing that separates him, he's physical. You get a corner at this level that not only wants to play pass, but he'll come up and hit you. Well, that's something at any level, whether it's Division I, Division III, or high school, that excites you about a cornerback. And he has that ability. Big playmaker. He always gets the top receiver, and he's done a great job for us.
After a bye week last week, Westminster has Saint Vincent in a battle of two second-year head coaches who both have trademarks of offense versus defense. Beznel sees this as a potential rivalry brewing between two teams who are trying to break into the upper echelon in the PAC.
I expect it to be a very hard-fought game. Got a lot of respect for Ron and his staff over at Saint Vincent. I think they do a really good job. Ron's an offensive guy. It's fun to prepare against them because they do so many different things on offense, and so it excites me because then, I want to do some things defensively to try to match what he's doing. I think because Coach and I started in the league at the same time, there's a lot of respect, but I think there's a little bit of a rivalry too. They have sort of same mentality. They want to be athletic, and that's sort of what we kind of want to build our program around too. We want to be an athletic football team, but we also understand that in the end, physical football teams win championships because you can only sort of, scheme up it for so long. At some point, you're going to have to line up and play it. So I think that's where we want to be. We want to be athletic, but also physical, and it's going to be a heck of a ball game.
Both teams enter the contest number 2 and number 4 in the conference, respectively, enforcing turnovers. Beznel believes whoever wins the turnover battle, but also the kicking game, will be the winner between two teams that like to run the football.
Both of us excel at taking the football away, and I think that's where the game will definitely be won or lost. The team that doesn't turn it over and the team that takes it away, I think in the end will have a chance to win this football game. Special teams for us, Garrett Clausen does a tremendous job last year, but we blocked the punt that put us in a position to put a touchdown on the board. I think that really turned the tide for us at St. Vincent. So the special teams, I think you hit the nail on the head there and turnover battle.
Westminster has the opportunity to finish the PAC season 8-1 and still has the opportunity on the table to win the conference or even be co-champions. Despite these aspirations, Beznel still wants his team solely focused on the task at hand.
It's certainly exciting that we're still in this position that we have a chance. But before we can really talk about week 9 and 10, we've got to take care of week 8. I think our guys have done a really good job of trying to focus week in and week out. It would be exciting to see our program within 2 years be able to make a turnaround at that point. But I'm just trying to make our players aware of St. Vincent, and then we'll deal with who we need to deal with after the fact. There's still a great deal of football left.
Thanks again to head coach Scott Beznel and Westminster College for being featured as this week's PAC Football Focus. Coming up next week, we'll focus on the currently undefeated top dogs in the conference, the Thomas More Saints, as they continue the quest for a conference title with Case Western Reserve on the horizon. Stay with us after the break. We'll take a look at all of Week 9's game action on the PAC Pregame Show here on PACathletics.org.
I'm Joe Anderko, Commissioner of the President's Athletic Conference. Want to know what makes the PAC so special? Here's a few reasons why.
Comprised of 10 private institutions and 2 affiliate members, the PAC remains unique in this era of high-pressure college athletics. Now sponsoring 21 sports as it celebrates over 60 years of competition, the PAC is regarded as one of the elite NCAA Division III conferences in the nation. Our student-athletes excel in athletics as well as the classroom, with numerous postgraduate scholarship winners, over 150 academic All-Americans, and over 900 academic honorable recipients with a 3.6 GPA or higher in the past year alone. Want to learn more? Visit us at www.pac.edu. pacathletics.org or follow the President's Athletic Conference on social media.
Academic and athletic excellence since 1955, the President's Athletic Conference.
And welcome back. It's the PAC Football Pregame Show here on pacathletics.org. Carson Fox alongside my good friends Andy Stanko and Creg Milko. And guys, before we get into Week 9 game action here on the show, let's take a look back at Week 8 and one of the biggest matchups on the season, the Case Western Reserve Spartans and the W&J Presidents. It went down to the wire, but Case pulled out the win 35-28. The game lived up to the hype. It was tied at 28 into the fourth quarter, and across the board on both sides, both quarterbacks, running games, and a wide receiver for each side had big days. Case Western Reserve played W&J's game on offense, 92 plays on the day, 4 of its 5 touchdown games on drives of 11 plays or more, and Rob Kuda, most important, played arguably his best game against his toughest opponent, 278 passing yards, 100 rushing yards, and 5 touchdowns on the day. But the defense coming away with a big play when it needed, an interception, Nick Kwan in the fourth quarter. Break it down for me. What'd you think of this game?
Well, it far and away was the most compelling, the best game in the PAC in the week that was. And really to the naysayers, to those who didn't believe in Case Western, and there were valid points coming into this game. Sean was on the show last week saying they hadn't seen an offense the caliber of W&J's. They haven't seen an offense work at the pace Jay works at. The quarterback play, the running back play, the receiver play, and Pete Coughlin, to his credit, had an outstanding game. The receiving core, a couple of guys had career days. But as good as W&J was, Case Western was flat out better. And you can't argue with the fact that now it's Case Western, it's Thomas More, it sets up another, we've had a couple of these de facto championship games, Case and Thomas More in Cleveland upcoming in the next week. So that's what I'm looking forward to. Other results in the past week, Geneva, Saint Vincent, thanks for playing. Not great teams this season. They had their opportunities against Bethany and CMU to come out and make statements against teams that aren't the tippy top of the PAC. They weren't able to do it. And then you're looking at the bottom of the conference, Teal, Waynesburg, Grove City. Exactly what you expect you got out of those 3 teams. Really, Case Western, hats off. A great week, great win.
Very impressed by Rob Kuda this week. 5 touchdown passes, a career high for him. And Andy, you're absolutely right. Just outperformed W&J. Really showed us that at the end of the day, the game is played on the field. From an outsider perspective, looking at the game on paper, it looked as though it was W&J's game to win. And now it's Case Western's conference to win after that.
I like the way they get 5 sacks on Pete Coughlin, and we have to shout out the special teams unit. Forcing W&J to start every drive in this contest on its own side of the field. The Presidents weren't allowed to take advantage like they were the week prior against Bethany. Really impressed with both teams. And a team I want to highlight making a statement also, Carnegie Mellon, 41-13 win against Saint Vincent. Proving, though, it might not be a PAC championship season, the Tartans are a team to be reckoned with and shouldn't be overlooked. The defense held the Bearcats down to 28-0 into the third quarter while forcing 3 interceptions, 2 for 11 and 0 for 2 on third and fourth down respectively, and allowing Sam Benger to have another 100-yard, 2-touchdown game. And Andrew Herron came to play. He's played well in the last 3 weeks. We'll get to that later. But 16 for 26 for 260 yards and 3 touchdowns. They still have non-conference Chicago, who was nationally ranked earlier this season, and Case Western Reserve at home in Week 11. But the Tartans are playing their best football right now. 4 wins in their last 5 games, with the loss coming by just 10 points on the road to Westminster. So really impressed with the Tartans. But let's put Week 8 to bed. Let's move on into Week 9. We're hitting the final stretch into the PAC season, and we'll kick it off with a game that was pushed back to 1 o'clock. The number 8 team in the PAC, the Waynesburg University Yellow Jackets, 3-5 overall, 2-4 in PAC play, against their number 11 team in the nation, the top dogs in the PAC, the Thomas More Saints, 8-0, undefeated, 6-0 in PAC play. This game being played in Crestview Hills, Kentucky. And Thomas More leads the all-time series, 8 wins to 4 losses, with the most recent Waynesburg win coming in 2012. And in 2014, it was a Thomas More 21-14 win at Waynesburg. Waynesburg allowed Dominic Hayden to get his 29 carries for 142 yards and a touchdown, while allowing Jensen Gebhardt to pass for 279 yards. But it all came down to the fourth quarter when Waynesburg had two chances offensively to tie the game up, thanks in part to an Aaron Palmer blocked field goal attempt. But against the stout Thomas More defense, Carter Hill was unable to drive the offense 77 yards for the tying score with just 51 seconds remaining, and the Saints walked away out of Waynesburg with a win. Much different stories for these two teams, at least for Waynesburg in 2015. Guys, what do we see in this matchup?
For the Waynesburg University Yellow Jackets, coming into this game, it doesn't look winnable, but given that Thomas More has Case Western next week, it's a game that's potentially for the PAC title. It could just so happen to be a trap game. If that's going to happen, a couple things have to fall into place for the Jackets. First and foremost, Jake Doherty has to take care of the ball. He's thrown the second most interceptions in the President's Athletic Conference for the Jackets. He's thrown at least one interception in every game, with the only exception coming against the Geneva Golden Tornadoes. And that game was absolutely out of hand for the Jackets, 41-24. The Geneva Golden Tornadoes ended up winning that game. He also has the lowest efficiency out of the top 10 quarterbacks that qualify for the passing efficiency rankings. And he is playing, and these Jackets are playing against the best team in the conference when it comes to intercepting the ball. So the Jackets, if they want to have any hope of winning, have to take care of the football. Thomas More is also not an offensive slouch this year, and the Jackets are towards the bottom of the conference in passing defense. Their DBs, their safeties are going to have to do a better job, and it's a tall task with wide receivers like Goose Cohorn, Ryan Winkler, two guys that are towards the top of the PAC. If Waynesburg's ninth best pass defense can step up and can have one great game, this could potentially be a trap game for Thomas More, but I don't think it all that likely.
Well, for Waynesburg, I'm really looking for this team to come out and compete at a much higher level than what we saw against Case Western. They went on the road, they traveled the night before to Cleveland, they got off the bus, and they got whacked. 6 drives in a row, Case Western goes down and scores, 2 turnovers, 4 punts, and all of a sudden it's 35-0. In talking to Coach Shepis this week, that's something he certainly looks to improve upon. And that really served as a wake-up call for this Jackets team, especially the defense. We had a conversation, Carson, with Zach Machuga, where they were embarrassed by the way they played against Case Western. And you've seen that newfound focus for this Waynesburg, especially defensively in the first half of the past 2 weeks, giving up just 7 points to Westminster, 3 points to Teal going into the locker room. And Zach Machuga, I also want to highlight his play. He's been outstanding, led the team in tackles against Teal in this past week. But I want to go back. You mentioned Jake Doherty. I certainly think last Saturday was a step forward for the freshman after a first half in which he threw 2 interceptions in the red zone, was without a touchdown pass. He comes out in the second half, 12 for 13, 3 touchdowns. The ball hits the ground a single time in the second half. And really, it was the vertical passing game. Waynesburg had its 3 longest passing plays of the entire season last week against Teal. 7 passing plays of 15 yards or more. We finally see Jake Doherty throw the ball down the football field. And you ask Coach Shepis why, he says that they lined up to stop the run. Safeties were in the box. And if you're Thomas More, certainly you look at this Waynesburg offense, the scariest part is Jerry Lohman and Kevin Barnes. And I think that Thomas More certainly is the horses up front to bottle up this run game, do what Westminster did against Waynesburg, doubling Kevin Barnes, and force Jake Doherty to beat them with passes down the field going to other receivers. And I'm not sure if Waynesburg can keep up with the firepower that Thomas More has offensively.
And a couple of notes on the Saints. Jensen Gebhardt, not listed on the 2 deep. Same with C.T. Tarrant. And you'd think a starting quarterback's out, a starting running back's out in this game. But Brennan Kuntz last week against Grove City, easy day for him. 14 of 20, 339 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. And then Javier Pitts, 24 carries, 156 yards, and 3 touchdowns. This Thomas More team is absolutely loaded across the board, and they deserve to come into this game as heavy favorites. I mean, they just blew out Grove City a week ago on the road 66-14. But you're right, Andy, it's all about how this defense responds, I think, in the first quarter. If it plays like it did in the first half against Westminster and the same way against Teal for 3 quarters before Ryan Radke became the quarterback, this defense and really the whole team has nothing to lose. Go out there, play your best football you can, and if Jake Dougherty can take a hold on the ball, that's Waynesburg's best chance in this game. But if they get down early, head coach Rick Shepis has already said that he's treating these last week's game, these first 2 games, like an extended spring practice. Yep. So we might see more players in this game to help build the program, which isn't a really bad thing. It's just if you see upwards of double-digit win for Thomas More in this game, that could be one of the reasons why.
And Waynesburg, for the 3rd week in a row, is getting a look defensively at a backup quarterback. Brendan Kuntz has over 1,000 yards passing, 8 touchdowns on the season. He's a guy who's gotten plenty of time, plenty of reps, started a game earlier in the season. He isn't your typical backup, not your Jarrett Pound or Shaman Walker coming into this game.
All right, let's move on, guys. Our second matchup, a non-conference game, noon kickoff in Cleveland, Ohio. Now the number 23 team in the nation, number 2 in the PAC, Case Western Reserve Spartans, 6-1 overall, 6-0 in PAC play, hosting non-conference Washington University in St. Louis, who is 5-2, and Washington owns the edge with 20 wins and 9 losses in the all-time series that was built during Case Western Reserve's time as a member of the University Athletic Association. And in 2014, Washington took home the victory 28-17 at home. Case Western Reserve's offensive day was derailed by 4 turnovers on the day. The Spartans cut the lead to within 2 scores with still 6 minutes and 46 seconds left in the 4th quarter, but the Bears went on a 13-play drive, picking up 5 first downs along the way to kill any comeback effort for Case. Totally different story for the Spartans, who are on a roll since losing by just 1 point against Chicago in Week 1. It's a former UAA member. What do we see in this matchup?
Hey, I didn't get a chance. I didn't really get into Case Western, the win over W&J. I want to give them their props right here, right now. Rob Kuda, signature performance. He should be your offensive player in the year in the PAC. Here's the difference between Rob Kuda, Sam Benger. Both amazing players. Sam Benger, over 300 yards on the ground against W&J, still lost the game by 20+. And then on the other side, you have Rob Kuda pulling out a victory, getting a signature win, and being the reason why. 5 touchdowns, 100 yards on the ground coming into the game. What are the questions facing Case Western? How will a quarterback-based rushing attack work against W&J? And Case doesn't have a go-to guy who makes those plays. You look at Rob Kuda, 100 yards. Canganelli and Hockman, 100 yards between the two of them to go with Kuda's 100. And then Brian Erb was that guy. It's been a committee at the wide receiver position. He had 9 catches, 147 yards, 2 touchdowns. Medved, 4 for 80 and a touchdown. But here's where Case Western won this game. Early on, W&J deep into Case territory twice. 2 critical 4th down stops early in the game. And then 6 for 15 on 3rd down for W&J. W&J is known for running a lot of plays. Case Western ran more. 6 drives of 10 plays or more. 1 for W&J, and all 5 touchdowns were drives of 71 yards or more. Case Western, a signature performance, absolutely the win of the season for them. And that had been the knock. Saint Vincent, Teal, Bethany, Waynesburg, those aren't great wins. Geneva, that was a close game for the first time all season. But this is one you can hang your hat on. This is the biggest win since entering the PAC. And hey, Washington's a team that can throw the ball a little bit. Their quarterback, J.J. Tomlin, leads the SAA, where they're an affiliate member, much like Case is in the PAC. In passing, he's a top 5 guy in terms of all Division III in completions per game. They're going to sling it around, but this Case Western defense proved a lot to me last week against W&J.
Agreed, and I think that Case Western can easily roll in this game. I think they can avenge last year's loss, win that UAA title, and compete for a President's Athletic Conference title, not a question.
The only thing I'm curious about is I want to see how this game starts. This is an offense in Washington that averages nearly 80 plays a game and outscores its opponents in the first half 193-83. Washington likes to air it out. Case gave up nearly 400 yards through the air last week to Pete Coughlin and W&J. I know this probably isn't in the minds of head coach Greg Debelak and the team, But we have to mention, Thomas More is up next week, then a red-hot Carnegie Mellon team that's a rival. 2 conference games that have more of an impact on Case Western Reserve's postseason chances than this game. After beating W&J, though, like Andy said, I have full confidence in Case Western Reserve against a non-conference opponent that they probably owe a game to and want revenge after losing last year. I'll just be curious to see how this game begins because Case is yet to get in any in a situation being down more than 7 points this season. Case has not trailed an opponent by 7 points or more. So if Washington goes up early, how does this team respond? Coot is great. 28 touchdowns to no interceptions.
That's the big point.
That's the key.
No interceptions. They don't give the football away. And I really think they will be motivated for the UAA game, considering how the season started week 1, being up 2 scores in the fourth quarter and blowing that game against Chicago. And you look at last year's game, 28-17, Case Western hasn't scored 17 points, that low of a number all season. 20 is the low for Case Western this season. It's certainly a much more explosive offense. I'm looking at the matchup at third down. Washington leads the SAA in third down conversions, 45%. Really a team that's going to try to spread Case Western out and throw the ball all over the place. But I would be a little bit wary about some of these numbers. The SAA, 4 wins, all 4 against the bottom teams in that conference. Imagine, Case Western coming into this game with impressive wins over Waynesburg, Geneva, Teal, and Grove City. The statistics might be a little bit skewed. You see 70 points last week, but then you go and look at the standings, and that team's a bottom dweller. So really, I'm not sure what to expect from Washington, but Case Western, I think I can count on them as a top 2 team in the PAC from here on out.
And another thing that may go overlooked from last week's game, Case Western Reserve fumbled the ball 4 times, didn't lose any. That was critical when it came to staying perfect on not turning the ball over. But let's move on. The number 11 team, unfortunately, 0-7 overall, 0-5 in PAC play. The Grove City Wolverines on the road at the number 7 team in the conference, the Bethany Bison, who are 3-5 overall, 2-4 in PAC play. This is a 1:30 kickoff in Bethany, West Virginia. Grove City leads the all-time series 42-25-2, dating back 102 years. But Bethany's won back-to-back over Grove City, including last year when the Bison won 34-9 at Grove City. Grove City was in this contest. It was just 10-9 Bethany over halfway into the third quarter, but then Bethany went on a streak of 24 unanswered points to win convincingly. Larry Potier recovered a fumble at the Grove City 9 to set up an easy touchdown for Brian Vales to Brandon Hill. Then Vales completed 2 passes to Eric Blinn over 35-plus yards, which was capped by another touchdown. Another fumble set up Bethany with another drive deep inside Grove City territory. Bethany scored a field goal, and you get the picture. The Wolverines shot themselves in the foot with costly mistakes. Guys, what do we see in this one? Bison, Wolverines.
In this one, I don't see Grove City getting their first win of the year. I think that could possibly come later. I'm really interested in Grove City Teal this year, that last game of the season, but I think the difference is really going to be Bethany's defense and Nadeem Radar. He was the defensive player of the year, or defensive player of the week, in the PAC. I think he's the difference. I think Bethany's defense helps them get over Grove City.
Yeah, we knew Grove City was going to be a team towards the bottom of the conference when we came into the season. But the fall of Bethany has really been sort of fascinating. Went from a top half team to what will most likely now be a 500 football team, or maybe 3-5, depending on that Saint Vincent Bethany game coming up. But that's an underrated game. But this game right here, you look at Bethany's resume: wins over Teal, Waynesburg, and Geneva, losses to Mount Union, Westminster, Case, W&J, CMU. None of those games were really that close at all, unless you want to count Westminster in that game. But in lots of ways, this is the same old Bethany team that we've been used to. Leading the PAC in sacks, leading the PAC in third down defense. Eric Blinn tops in the PAC in catches and touchdowns through the air, second in receiving yards. Jalen Holmes is a top 5 back, averaging over 100 yards per game. Where did things go wrong? The turnover margin, -12. The only team with a worse turnover margin, Grove City, who's on the other side this week. And those turnovers put the defense in bad situations. They've been put in the red zone more times than anyone else defensively. They've got the second worst red zone defensively, percentage-wise, and they've given up more touchdowns than anyone within the 20-yard line. And that turnover margin goes both ways. 21 giveaways, second worst, but only 9 takeaways from this defense, which is also second worst in the PAC. And Lincoln Reyes, if he didn't turn the football over, would be certainly an asset for this team. He's third in the conference in passing, but 7 more interceptions than the next guy who qualifies, 16 picks for the year. We saw Brian Vales go down in flames last season, and no one just comes into their first year and just figures things out unless you play for W&J in this conference. That being said, Bethany had some pride, took care of Geneva relatively easily, averaged 8 yards per play, only faced 7 third downs last week, and Reyes played one of his better games, 17 for 23, 272, 2 touchdowns, and you saw this defense get back to what they do so well. Larry Potier, as you mentioned, Carson, a return touchdown, and Nadim Radar, 3.5 sacks.
Ooh.
You mentioned, Craig, a fantastic performance, and then you get 7.5 yards per carry from Jalen Holmes. The talent was there for Bethany this season. It was just not being able to put it together, especially with the quarterback play. And for Grove City, they're happy to see a team that isn't W&J, CMU, and Thomas More like they've had the last 3 weeks, but still a tall order against the talent that Bethany brings.
Andy, you stole practically all my points right there. I for as much as you really hurt Lincoln Reyes right there, I mean, he played a great game last week. I mean, 17 for 23, efficient, 272 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's what this Bethany team could be if he just takes care of the ball. Jalen Holmes was putting together such an underrated season this year.
He's a top 5 back.
He's put together such an underrated season, and you still have the best receiver in the conference, and Eric Blinn, another solid day, 7 catches, 117 yards, and a touchdown.
Throwing a punt return for a touchdown as well.
And the Bethany defense back to form, 17 for 23 on 3rd and 4th down, including 1 and 2 in the red zone, and Larry Potier coming up with the nail in the coffin. Fumble recovery. Nadim Radar, just to quantify his great day, 12 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks, and 2 quarterback hurries. I mean, that's what we were expecting from this Bethany team coming on early in the season, and yes, it has been hurt by short fields to work with, namely 2 weeks ago against W&J. But on the opposite side for Grove City, I mean, we're back to the quarterback carousel. It's now Antonio Caroscia, Matt Pennypecker, and now Caleb Jakey will see significant time. And that may be due to injury between Antonio Caroscia and Matt Pennypecker. But I just think the best way to complement inconsistent quarterback play, like we've seen with Waynesburg this season, with Jerry Lawman having a great year, is the solid run game. But the Wolverines continue to be ineffective running the ball, averaging just 69 yards per game and scoring 4 rushing touchdowns, both league lows. The backbone of this team has traditionally been the defense, and last week, 3 upperclassmen leaders, Brandon Beringer, Andrew Seifert, Bobby Tuttle, played their hearts out a week ago with double-digit tackles against Thomas More in that 66-14 loss. They just have to start forcing some turnovers. Last in forcing turnovers against a turnover-prone Bethany team to set this offense with some short fields to work with. Just 3 games left on this team to come away with a win for head coach Chris Smith in his final season. And they have a tough Westminster team next week at home. So really, this is a game that's questioning, does Grove City still have some fight inside?
Well, I'm circling that last week of the season against Teal, if I'm Grove City, as the best chance to get the win. And you mentioned the struggles in running the football. 1.9 yards a carry this season.
What can you do with that?
For Grove City, I don't care who's playing quarterback, Caroscia, Pennypecker, Jakeel. And Jakeel was a little feisty out there. 142 yards, a couple of touchdowns, a 61-yard completion to Zach Gazdeko. But really, taking care of the football, not beating yourself. We saw Grove City be competitive with Juniata, Waynesburg, Geneva, and what's bitten them is allowing teams to get to their quarterback, forcing pressure, getting sacks, and then in turn turning the football over. You said it, Carson. No one turns it over more. No one takes it away from the other team fewer times or less than Grove City. And hopefully they can get it around. And Bethany is certainly a candidate to do that, considering their turnover problems.
All right, guys, let's move on. A 7 o'clock night game in Greenville, Pennsylvania. The number 10 team in the PAC, the Teal Tomcats, 1-6 overall, 0-5 in PAC play, host the number 4 team in the PAC, the Carnegie Mellon Tartans, who are red hot, 4-3 overall, 4-2 in PAC play, and CMU owns the all-time series lead with 28 wins, 11 losses, and 2 ties. CMU won in 2006 after losing to Teal in 2005 during its PAC championship season. The series took a 7-season hiatus before starting again last season in a game in which Teal won 40-27 at Carnegie Mellon. It was a big day for then sophomore quarterback Ryan Radke, who passed for 256 yards on 15 completions out of 24 attempts and 3 touchdowns, while running 11 times for 114 yards and 2 touchdowns. All 3 of Radke's passing touchdowns went to Marcus Johnson, who had a big day, but we all know he's not there anymore. And Teal completely neutralized CMU's run game, just 9 yards rushing on the day. It's hard to comprehend that Sam Benger only rushed 7 times for 2 yards in that game. Guys, what are we seeing this time around?
Well, I'm putting my money on Sam Benger getting more than that. He's leading rusher in the PAC, almost 1,300 yards in the season, 6.5 yards a carry, 184 yards per game, 12 touchdowns. He's a breakout player of the year, him and Rob Kuda. But for CMU, I want to highlight Andrew Herron. Who is this
great.
Andrew Herron, and what have you done with him? He's been outstanding these last few weeks. Perhaps his best performance coming this past week, 230 yards, 3 touchdowns without an interception. He's found Graham Schilling 9 times, 159 yards, and then John Prather 5 times for 90 yards. At the beginning of the season, we were saying, how is this offense so bad? You've got the guy who's leading the nation in rushing, even with an early bye. And his numbers, Sam Benger's numbers, have been down, only 113 yards and 2 touchdowns against Saint Vincent. But if Herron can give you this balance, I'd say the offense as a whole is even better. And defensively, the numbers aren't great, but allowed just 13 to Saint Vincent, 7 to Geneva, shut out Grove City, took the ball away from Bethany, allowed 26 points against Westminster, which is still a winnable game with good quarterback play. 4 takeaways last week, 18 on the season, a plus 10 turnover margin. I would have called you a liar if you said that CMU would lead the PAC in turnover margin, but they're doing it this season. Hats off. Brian Corey, 4 sacks last week. He leads the PAC, 10.5 on the season. Drew Fitzmaurice, another interception leading the PAC. Carnegie Mellon, Case Western, bravo. After last season coming in and being sort of vanilla, not having too much of a storyline besides being the new kids on the block, CMU and Case Western have been getting it done. They're both bona fide top half teams, and they're figuring it out. Congratulations. The Tartans are having an awesome year.
Number for the statistics for the last 3 games for Andrew Herron, 41 for 71 for 683 yards, 10 touchdowns to just 2 interceptions. That's the reason why Andrew Herron is completely changing that offense to be more dynamic and balanced on both sides.
And when you think about some of the games he's had, W&J comes to mind, where it's just the offense was so strapped, even when they ran the ball effectively. Good for him.
Yeah, I think it's a perfect storm for Carnegie Mellon to get an easy win against a Teal team whose rushing defense is second worst in the President's Athletic Conference, giving up 213 yards a game on average. I think Sam Benger has a great opportunity to pad those stats this week.
Get to the 1,300-yard mark, and I want to take a look at Teal here quickly. Some mixed reviews. I think Jarrett Pounds, who they're grooming as that next quarterback, he's got a little ways to go. Certainly put on size, decision-making.
That's what I was going to say. I completely understand why, seeing that game firsthand last week, why Teal head coach Kurt Reiser made the move, putting Ryan Radke as a wide receiver from quarterback, considering in last week's contest the unit had about 4 or 5 drops, and outside of Alex Werviditz, who was a culprit of one of those drops on a big play, there's no one on the outside quite, like Radke, who can make a man miss in open space and make a big play. And the ground game hit one of its lowest points last week, recording just 25 yards on 12 carries. But I think you have to I agree with you. I think the Jarrett Pound experiment needs to be thrown out the window, as Radke showed in the way that he was able to torch Waynesburg in the final few minutes, accounting for 12 of Teal's 15 points on the day. It was all Ryan Radke in that fourth quarter, and we've seen how he's played against Waynesburg over the last 2 years. And in the post-game interview, Coach Shepis even said, Waynesburg knew it'd have to defend well when Ryan Radke was on the field. That's when we knew we had to play. But when we saw Pound in the game, it was pretty easy. They knew that they were going to be advantageous in those areas. And in this contest, against an even better opponent, in my opinion, in Carnegie Mellon, you have to let Ryan Radke just go out there and play backyard football. because he's dynamic. He can make types of plays that Rob Kuda has the numbers to prove for it, and I think Rob Kuda, with especially the weapons around him, is right now a better quarterback, but he's that type of quarterback that can beat you both run and pass.
And I'm looking for more production out of the running back position, especially if they want to move to pound moving forward. Daly, Black, Ingram, Seister, someone needs to step up and be that number one guy and get those 4 yards a carry to make it an effective rushing offense. But defensively, I do want to highlight Jake Elk, Doak Walker. Those two guys were animals against Waynesburg. Jake Elk, 13 tackles, 2 for loss, and a pick. Doak Walker, a pick as well, 2.5 tackles for loss. And really, you look at Teal last season, 3 seniors playing linebacker, a couple of all PAC guys back there. I really like what they were able to do out of that position. Riley Shane, you know what you're going to get from him defensively. And outside of the 129-yard rush from Jerry Lawman, Teal sort of bottled up that Waynesburg run game, dared Doherty and this receiving corps to beat him, and that's what they did. And I think that's what they'll do again this week with CMU.
All right, let's move on. A 7 o'clock kickoff in Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania. The number 9 team in the conference, the Geneva Golden Tornadoes, 2-5 overall, 1-4 in PAC play, host and this is something new, the number 5 team in the PAC, the Washington and Jefferson Presidents, who are 5-2 overall, 3-2 in conference play. W&J leads the all-time series, 41-19-2. The Presidents have won the last 10 matchups, including all 8 against Geneva head coach Gino DeMarco. The series took a hiatus from the late 80s until 2007, so Geneva has not beaten W&J since 1983 when Ronald Reagan was president. And then in 2014, it was a 51-12 W&J win at home. It was all presidential in this one. W&J scored on its first 4 offensive possessions, taking the sails out of Geneva, and led 37-0 at halftime after scoring 5 touchdowns and a safety. W&J dominated the day on offense, outgaining Geneva 582 to 251 yards, as Geneva really didn't have a response until late in the third quarter and then midway through the fourth, scoring touchdowns to salvage the day. Presidents, Golden Tornadoes. Guys, what do we see in this one?
Looking at this game, it could be perceived that W&J is going to be a little bit down, losing a heartbreaker to Case Western and essentially being put out of that race for a PAC title and a playoff spot. But that has not been the case in the Mike Sirianni era of W&J football. They have never lost back-to-back games in the same season. And since 2003, W&J is 18-0 following the loss. So this team's going to come back. This team's going to recover. They had a great offensive day against Case Western despite losing that game. They just weren't as good on offense. They still came in. They still did what they do. It just so happened that Case Western was better on that day. W&J is going to be back in form this week.
Oh, we saw it. I mean, a couple weeks ago, W&J falls on the road to Thomas More, comes home, plays Grove City, 55-7. Utter domination.
Yeah, and for W&J, I'm sort of glad that you're here, Craig, and not Sean, because I know Sean would still be lobbying for the Presidents to be ranked and still to be have a chance to get that at-large bid. But when your best win is Westminster, your 2 biggest games on the schedule are losses, it's hard to justify a top 25 ranking or an at-large bid to the D3 playoffs. And did this W&J team have the capacity to beat Thomas More and Case Western? Probably. Did going on the road for both big games have an influence on the outcome of the season? I'd think so. But I don't think we can call W&J a top 2 team after these losses. You had certifiably monster games out of Pete Coughlin and Jesse Zubik. Coughlin, 377 yards. Zubik, 196 of them through the air and a touchdown. But as good as W&J was, Case Western was better. Third down, W&J 6 for 15, Case 11 for 21. And Case ran 92 plays to W&J's 73s. I think there are only 2 teams in the PAC that can do what Case Western and Thomas More have done to W&J, and those are the only 2 losses for the Presidents of this season. But for W&J, I really point to the 3 times that Kuda fumbled. They didn't recover any of them, allowed 5 scoring drives of 70 or more yards, 4 of them 11 plays or more, and they also failed to convert a 4th and 2 at the Case 22, a 4th and 1 on the Case 34-yard line on the first 2 drives of this game, really allowing Case Western to get the momentum right out the gate with a couple of big stops. And you see right now reflected in the rankings, 9th in run defense, but certainly they have an opportunity to pad their stats if they want to with Geneva, Teal, Waynesburg to finish out this season. I'd expect an angry W&J team against this Geneva team.
Oh, I completely agree with you, Andy. And on the flip side, to get to Geneva, I know Geneva's played 4 tough defenses the last 4 weeks, but the Golden Tornadoes have just scored 43 points since scoring 41 on Waynesburg in Week 3. And that's really a tough pill to swallow for this offense. The run game has been completely in flux with Dylan Jones losing carries, and that could be due to injuries. They're now second last in the PAC, averaging just 89 yards on the ground per game. But I like how Aaron Channing responded last week to not starting at quarterback. Javed Ellis started the game, the freshman. He went 26 for 41, 298 yards, 2 touchdowns, and did have an interception. But especially because of the connection that he's developing with Nick Cook, especially looking ahead to 2016. 12 catches, 144 yards, and 2 touchdowns on the day for Nick Cook. But really, this offense suffered such a setback last week at Bethany, 41-15. 8 sacks suffered on the day, inefficient on third and fourth down, 7 for 23 on the day, and really just drives derailing because of that, even though Geneva outgained Bethany 425 to 415 yards on the day. It was the turnovers and just the inefficient play between the two quarterbacks. And I don't want to have to miss him in this contest, but Ryan Ruffing is putting together another solid season. I know that W&J has a long history of great talented players that have come through the football program, but Ryan Ruffing really has been the heart and soul of this team for the last 2 seasons, up to 15 rushing touchdowns on the season, leading the PAC, and now wide receiver Jesse Zubik looks to be back to form after having a monster day last week, 12 catches, 196 yards, and a touchdown against a stout Case Western Reserve defense. I know that this team that had aspirations for a national title this season, and because of the 2 losses, it seems like this team's on the outside looking in with Thomas More, Case Western Reserve, and now even Westminster having a better position right now for a PAC title. But getting to an ECAC bowl game has a way distant outside dark horse shot at an at-large bid in this conference. I think that it takes out some of those frustrations again on Geneva today.
Yeah, to touch on Geneva, the only real positive takeaway from these last 4 weeks, I would say, is the defensive performance we saw against Case Western Reserve, making life really difficult for Rob Kuda. 17 incompletions in that game. But I would say one thing about this Geneva team, I wouldn't look too deeply into the final record. It's skewed against them. They miss out on Grove City. It's a non-conference game, and they don't get Teal at all, and they had to play CMU, Thomas More, Case, W&J, Westminster all on the schedule. That's a tough lineup. All of the top dogs on the PAC, and they didn't get a chance at Teal or Grove City counting for them. Just a last thought on the Golden Tornadoes.
All right, let's move on to our featured matchup of the week featuring our PAC Football Focus, and thank you again to head coach Scott Beznel and Westminster College. The Titans are 5-2 overall, 4-1 in PAC play. This is a 1 o'clock kickoff in New Wilmington, Pennsylvania, and against the number 6 team in the PAC, the Saint Vincent Bearcats, 3-4 overall, 2-3 in PAC play. And Westminster 6-2 versus Saint Vincent in the modern era when the Bearcats brought back football in 2007. And in 2014, it was a 28-14 Westminster win at Saint Vincent. It was a defense-first football game in which Westminster was able to win because of holding to Saint Vincent to 7 of 21 on third and fourth down while forcing 3 turnovers. The Titans set the tone, scoring on their first 2 offensive possessions. Paul Colombo, 3 touchdown passes on the day, and a player on the opposite side of the field who had a big day, Cervante Kraft, 21 attempts for 93 yards and a touchdown. Bearcats, Titans, guys, what do we see in this one?
In this one, I see 2 middle-of-the-road teams in the PAC, and the difference, I think, is going to be defense. Westminster's, across the board, the 3rd best in the PAC. They're 3rd in total defense, and they're 3rd in passing defense. They're 2nd in rushing defense. I think that Westminster's defense can really be the difference in this game.
Heck, I would go beyond middle of the road. I think Westminster wins 8 games this year, really, and I have to tip the cap to head coach Scott Beznel because I I think they do have a really good claim to be that number 3 team in the conference this year, pushing W&J to the wire, 35-31. Losing 45-14 to Thomas More, but Thomas More proving to be the cream of the crop in the PAC. Wins over CMU and Bethany. Really, I think they do stake their claim for that top 4 spot. I hope that they get an ACAC game because I think they certainly earned it. They're coming off the bye, which certainly works to Westminster's advantage, considering Shaman Walker is the guy the rest of the way since of Paul Colombo's injury. And Shaman Walker, as we saw against Waynesburg, he can play a little bit, and they can protect him by running the ball effectively. Dominique McKinley, someone who's been so consistent this season, and then a game breaker in Demetrius Bentley, who had 172 yards on just 9 offensive touchdowns against Waynesburg, one of the fastest guys in the PAC. And defensively, Westminster as good as advertised against Waynesburg when we saw them. Matt Quinn, a PAC first-team candidate in my opinion, leads the PAC in tackles, leads the PAC in forced fumbles, top 10 guy in tackles per loss. And then you've got other pieces. Rich Ellaby needs to be accounted for. Todd Jeter's quietly becoming one of the best cover guys in the PAC. In Westminster, you talked about the numbers, Craig. Virtually top 3 in every team defensive statistical category, and they are second in time of possession, meaning they're running the football effectively, they're keeping possession, and then they've got a fresh defense out there that's doing its job. 21 takeaways, second in the PAC. A great job this season for Westminster. We came in thinking they'd be a middle-of-the-road team, excited about that young talent. They were able to put it together this year. An outstanding job by the Titans.
It's an easy concept for this game. 3 wins, you finish 8-1 in PAC play for Westminster. You have the defense to do it. You have playmakers. On the offensive side of the ball, whether we see Paul Colombo start at quarterback or Shaman Walker, continue to develop that young receiving core, beat the ball with Dominique McKinley, who's one of the best in the PAC. You have your goal, Westminster. Go reach it right there. Take a weekly approach, like your head coach Scott Beznel said, and continue to pound the rock. You have this game at home. You're coming off a bye. You're fresh. Finish the job. And then on the opposite side of this field for Saint Vincent, show that you still have some fight left. Show some pride. Evan Sheminsky, you transferred here from Kent State to Mount Union and now to Saint Vincent, presuming to be the quarterback. Only a few more weeks left in your college career. He saw significant time in last week's game. And then for the other quarterback, Tyler Donahue, who we've seen, take a stranglehold on this position. Last week, after fighting into the fourth quarter against Thomas More the week prior, 28-28, and then really just to lay an egg against Carnegie Mellon, and Shavonte Kraft, I have the numbers to back it up. Last season, 5th in the PAC with 813 rushing yards and 9 touchdowns. This season's, his carries have been cut by nearly 2/3, just 313 yards and 5 touchdowns. I was really high on this team, the way it played against Thomas More, but just we're back into that cycle. We're back into that two quarterback rotation that we saw plague this team the last 2 seasons. So Westminster, take advantage of that. The only player who I think, great job for this season for St. Vincent, Damon Black, another solid day, 8 catches, 118 yards, and a touchdown. Really the only player to write home from that week. But this defense, came away with a blocked punt on its first defensive series, setting the tone for this offense, and the offense just went flat in this last game against Carnegie Mellon. So show that you have some fight, show that you have some heart, and make a rebound. The season's almost over.
St. Vincent, thanks for playing, but that loss against CMU puts you in the decidedly average tier in the PAC. That's not too bad of a thing when you recall the winless season 2 years ago. Last year picked to finish last, going 4-4. But this St. Vincent team seems destined to go 4-4 again with Westminster, Geneva, and Bethany to finish out the season. And Evan Sheminsky, you mentioned him, Carson. He was supposed to be the answer, and here we are in Week 9. It's Andy Borgen and Matt Deakins all over again.
2.0.
I'd say they're
better.
Donahue and Sheminsky are incrementally better, but you're getting the same results.
Yes.
At the end of the day. And you really look at the last game. You mentioned they start the game with a defensive stop. They block the punt. They take over the 20. They turn it over on downs. A good kick return on the second drive sets up the offense around midfield. They turn it over on downs. And then nothing. 5 punts, 2 turnovers before they finally get on the board. And the game could have even been more lopsided. CMU had 2 turnovers on downs in the red zone, and the team really doesn't have a calling card. Last year it was defense, pass defense, takeaways, Shavonte Kraft, and awesome special teams play. They're middle in the road in a lot of categories, but the worst third down defense makes them a team that It's just hard to put it together. And if anyone can stop Tyler Donahue, I love this Westminster defensive front.
All right, guys, I greatly appreciate the analysis. It's going to be another exciting week. Week 9 in the President's Athletic Conference, winding down the season. We finally have those tiers emerging, and we have our eyes on a PAC title. Thanks for tuning in this week. Next week on the PAC Football Focus, we'll be talking to Thomas More College head coach Regis Skate for the PAC Football Focus, and we'll break it down once again for Week 10 of the PAC Pregame Show. Have a nice weekend here on PACathletics.org.